It was the year 1874, and the American Southwest had earned its reputation for being a wild, untamed land. The landscape stretched endlessly, filled with sharp, jagged mountains, hot desert plains, and dark forests that seemed to go on forever. In the midst of it all, there was a small, modest cabin, tucked away deep in the heart of this vast wilderness. Inside this cabin lived Caleb Matthews, a quiet and solitary man who made a living as a fur trapper. Caleb had chosen this life not because he liked being alone, but because it was the only life that made sense to him. He had grown tired of the crowded towns and the constant noise of the world. Out here in the wilderness, he could find peace. Caleb was used to the solitude. Most of his days were spent checking his traps, hunting, or working on his cabin. He had no need for the company of others, not after everything that had happened back home. The world was far from kind, and Caleb had learned to keep to himself. There was only one thing that ever seemed to disturb the calm of his days: the storms. The storms in this part of the country were unlike anything Caleb had ever seen. When they came hard and fast. They could take a sunny day and turn it into an angry, violent chaos within minutes. The wind howled, and the rain came down in sheets, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet in front of you. Caleb had seen storms come and go many times, but there was something different about this particular one. The skies darkened quickly that afternoon. Caleb had been working on mending one of his old fur traps when the wind began to pick up. It was a strange wind, one that didn't just rustle the trees but seemed to scream through the forest like a living thing. He could feel the tension in the air, as if nature itself was preparing for something worse. Caleb took a deep breath, knowing the storm was about to hit hard. He decided to head inside before the rain began. He'd only just managed to get the fire going when the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, hitting the ground with a sharp, steady patter. Within minutes, the sky was pouring down like a waterfall, and the wind howled through the cracks of the cabin, making the timbers groan. Caleb pulled his worn coat tighter around his shoulders as he sat by the fire, trying to ignore the feeling of being trapped. He wasn't afraid of storms. He had weathered many of them. But there was something unsettling about the violence of this one. The hours passed slowly. Caleb stared into the fire, lost in his thoughts, when suddenly he heard a sound, a knock at the door. He froze. Who would be out here in this storm? His first instinct was to ignore it. Anyone sensible would be hiding from the rain, not wandering through the forest in the middle of a tempest. But the knock came again, louder this time. It was not the sound of someone seeking shelter. It felt different, urgent. Caleb's heart began to race. He grabbed his rifle from the corner of the room, unsure of what to expect. Slowly, he made his way to the door, his hand trembling slightly. As he opened the door, his eyes widened in surprise. Standing before him, drenched from head to toe, was a group of women. Not just any women, but Apache women. Their dark eyes gleamed with intensity, and their faces were set in expressions of determination. They were soaked through, their clothes sticking to their skin, but despite the rain, there was something about them that radiated strength. They were fierce even in the face of such a terrible storm. Caleb was taken aback, unsure of what to say. The women stood silently as if waiting for him to speak. The rain poured down around them, but they didn't seem bothered by it. There was something in their posture, something that made Caleb realize these weren't ordinary travelers. These were Apache warriors. They had the look of women who had seen war, who had fought, and who had survived. Finally, one of them stepped forward. She was tall, taller than most of the men Caleb had encountered, and her dark hair was braided tightly down her back. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, met Caleb's. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and confident. "We need shelter," she said simply, her words heavy with the weight of an unspoken history. "We've been on the run." Caleb hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wasn't used to having visitors, especially not Apache warriors. There had been rumors of skirmishes between settlers and native tribes, but Caleb had never wanted to get involved. Yet something in the woman's voice made it clear that they weren't asking for permission. They were asking for survival. "Come inside," Caleb finally said, stepping aside to let them in. The women entered quickly, their movements graceful despite their soaked clothes. Caleb closed the door behind them, his mind racing with questions. Why were they here? What had they been running from? And more importantly, who were they running from? Once inside, the women stood quietly by the fire, trying to dry themselves off. Caleb made no move to ask questions, unsure if they were willing to talk. It felt like an unspoken agreement had been made. They were here for shelter, and he wasn't going to ask about their past. After all, they hadn't asked for his history. The woman who had spoken earlier, the one who had led the group, settled near the fire. She looked at Caleb with an unreadable expression, and for a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the rain pounding on the roof. Caleb watched them for a long time, the weight of their presence heavy in the room. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman turned to him. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper as she spoke again. "I saw the cowboy first," she said, her words floating into the quiet room like a mystery. Her tone was serious, almost wistful, as if she were revealing something from long ago. Caleb didn't understand. The phrase didn't make sense to him, but the way she said it made his chest tighten with confusion. What did she mean? What was she trying to tell him? Before he could ask, the woman turned away, leaving Caleb alone with his thoughts. The rest of the night passed in silence. Caleb lay awake on his bed, listening to the storm outside, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the strange words the woman had spoken. What did they mean? Why had she said it to him? He had no answers, only questions that seemed to grow more confusing with each passing hour. As the night wore on, the storm began to subside. The wind slowed and the rain turned to a gentle drizzle. The Apache women remained in the cabin, huddled near the fire for warmth. Caleb lay there staring at the ceiling, still wondering about the meaning of the woman's cryptic statement. It was a strange night, one that would change Caleb's life in ways he couldn't yet understand. But for now, all he could do was wait, listen to the rain, and try to make sense of the words that had been whispered in the dark. The morning after the storm was quiet. Caleb awoke to the soft chirping of birds outside the cabin and the golden light of dawn filtering through the cracks in the wooden walls. He had hardly slept through the night, his mind still tangled with the strange words that the Apache woman, a pony, had spoken. "I saw the cowboy first." Those words kept echoing in his head, like a riddle he couldn't solve. As he sat up and rubbed his eyes, Caleb noticed that the Apache women were already awake. A pony was sitting near the fire, her dark eyes lost in thought as she stared at the dancing flames. Her companions were silently tending to their belongings, brushing off the wet clothes from the storm and preparing to move. There was no hurry, no rush. They seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Caleb slowly got out of bed, moving quietly so as not to disturb them. He glanced at the women, each one powerful in her own way, but a pony's presence was the most striking. It wasn't just her physical strength, though that was obvious in the way she moved, but there was something more, something in the way she carried herself, something that hinted at past pain and loss, at a life lived with great hardship. As Caleb began to prepare breakfast over the fire, a pony finally broke the silence. "You don't trust us, do you?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge to it, like she already knew the answer. Caleb looked up, startled. He hadn't realized she was watching him so closely. "It's not that," he said carefully, stirring the pot of stew. "It's just, I don't know who you are or where you've come from. I'm not used to having visitors, especially not Apache warriors." A pony nodded as if she understood. "Most people aren't, but we're not here to hurt you. We just need a place to rest." Caleb felt a mix of emotions. He had always lived by the rule that you never trusted strangers, especially those from enemy tribes. Yet something about these women was different. They weren't like the hostile, violent figures he had heard about in the stories. There was a quiet, almost dignified energy about them. It made Caleb hesitate. He wanted to believe them, but the world he lived in made it difficult to do so. As he handed a pony a bowl of stew, she accepted it with a silent nod. She didn't look at him with suspicion, but there was a sadness in her eyes, like she had seen too much of the world's cruelty. The other women ate in silence, their eyes shifting occasionally to the window, as if they were waiting for something and or someone. The day passed slowly, the air warm but with a subtle chill from the remnants of the storm. Caleb found himself caught in his thoughts more than usual. He couldn't stop wondering about a pony and her strange words. "I saw the cowboy first." He wanted to ask her what she meant, but something told him that she wasn't ready to reveal that part of her story just yet. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the peaceful atmosphere of the cabin was interrupted by a low sound in the distance. It was a faint noise, but Caleb immediately recognized it. Hoofbeats. Someone was coming, his heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the Apache women's enemies had found them? Or was it something worse? He moved quickly to the window and peeked outside. What he saw nearly made his heart stop. A group of cowboys riding in from the distance were making their way toward the cabin. There were at least 5 of them, their horses kicking up dust as they moved at a steady pace. Caleb's first instinct was to reach for his rifle. He didn't know if they were coming for trouble or if they had spotted the Apache women. But before he could act, a pony stood up, her eyes narrowing as she studied the approaching riders. "They've found us," she said softly, her voice a mixture of anger and resignation. Caleb looked at her, unsure of what to do. He wanted to ask if they should hide, if they should run, but a pony's gaze was steady, like she had already made up her mind. "There's no use running," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "They'll find us eventually." Caleb was torn. He had no loyalty to these cowboys, but he wasn't sure if he was prepared for a fight either. The world outside the cabin was violent and unpredictable, and he knew that any action could lead to danger. A pony walked toward the door, her steps purposeful. She looked at Caleb, her expression serious. "You stay here. Don't make a sound unless I say so." Before Caleb could respond, the door swung open and a pony stepped outside, her stance confident and unafraid. The other Apache women followed her, moving with quiet grace. Caleb stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. He knew he was no match for the skill of these women, but he also knew that if they were going to face danger, it would be best to stand with them. Slowly, he grabbed his rifle and followed them outside, stepping into the fading light of the evening. As the cowboys approached, a pony raised her hand in a gesture of calm. The riders slowed their horses, eyeing the group of women warily. They were armed, but it seemed that they weren't sure what to make of the situation. One of the cowboys, a man with a weathered face and a scar running down his cheek, called out, "What's this?" A group of Apache women hiding out in a settler's cabin. A pony's eyes locked with his and she spoke without hesitation. "We're not here to cause trouble. We've been on the run, and this man," she nodded toward Caleb, "has offered us shelter for the night." The cowboy's eyes shifted to Caleb, sizing him up. Caleb stood tall, his rifle resting loosely in his hands, trying to appear calm. He didn't speak, unsure of what to say. The cowboy snorted, clearly not impressed. "You trust these women, settler?" A pony stepped forward, her voice steady. "I trust them enough to know we've got no quarrel with you. We're just passing through." The tension in the air was thick. Caleb could feel his heart racing. It was clear that the cowboys weren't entirely convinced, but they seemed to know when not to push things too far. After a long moment, the scarred cowboy gave a short nod. "All right. But don't make any trouble, understand?" A pony didn't flinch. "Understood." With that, the cowboys turned their horses and rode off, disappearing into the distance. A pony stood there for a moment, watching them leave. Then, without saying another word, she turned and headed back inside the cabin. The other women followed her, and Caleb, still shaken, followed them too. As they settled back by the fire, Caleb couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and confusion. He had just witnessed something that he couldn't fully understand. A pony had faced down the cowboys without fear, without hesitation, but there was something in the way she had spoken, something that made Caleb realize just how much history was behind every word, every action. Once inside, a pony finally turned to Caleb, her voice quiet but serious. "Now I'll explain, but not yet. You're not ready to hear it all?" Caleb nodded, his mind still spinning. He didn't know what she meant, but he knew that this was only the beginning. There was much more to a pony and her people than he had ever imagined. And as the night stretched on, Caleb's curiosity grew, fueled by the cryptic words a pony had spoken earlier, the ones that haunted him still. "I saw the cowboy first." It was a phrase that, no matter how hard he tried to shake it, lingered in his mind, waiting for the truth to finally be revealed.